Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm Herel Hughes. Taiwan's health ministry has proposed to legalize surrogacy in Taiwan. The new bill would allow Taiwanese women to carry other people's children. The article on surrogacy is bundled in together with a series of other assisted reproductive services that are supposed to combat Taiwan's continuously declining birth rate. So before we dive into our discussion today, we want to take a look at a clip at how this bill is dividing Taiwan's activists. John Van Trieste has this story.
The idea of surrogacy is nothing new to Taiwan society. There are companies and organizations that help match Taiwanese people with surrogate mothers in places like Ukraine and parts of the United States. But legalizing the practice in Taiwan could make it more affordable. LGBTQ+ groups are particularly excited by the idea.
有一些女同志朋友，他们想要有下一代，但是在台湾没有办法使用合法人工生殖技术。男同志的朋友其实是去国外做代孕，哇，那花的钱就更多，可能都要几百万。
The bill would come with tight restrictions on who can be a surrogate mother, and it wouldn't allow payments to these women, only help with expenses. But some women's groups are skeptical about these guardrails.
会选择去担任代理孕母的女性，其实多数都是经济的弱势嘛。那他们用一个非商业化、利他的这个包装，其实这背后还是对女性的剥削。
You can watch a full report on the TaiwanPlus news website. Now back in the studio, let's dive into this surrogacy bill. Joining us in the discussion is Chen Wen-Wei, Christina. Christina is the vice chair of the Awakening Foundation, an organization that combats gender discrimination in Taiwan. Christina, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be able to discuss this issue. I think we want to take a very prudent approach.
So I want to go into the bill a bit more. What exactly does the bill say? What would surrogacy look like in Taiwan if this were to pass?
For surrogacy, the main remission was about, and it allows women in the wedlock who are under the age of 50 and by the doctor's prescription and of course by the consent of their spouse that to borrow the womb from the other woman. And then the other woman, the surrogated mother, is also restricted to Taiwanese who is legally resided in Taiwan and who should be between 20 and 39 and be fresh and be certified by doctor as a healthy woman and who is having experienced the giving birth and full term of the natural birth. However, this law only allows surrogate mothers entitlement to allowances that ensure safe pregnancy and medical care during that process. So here we kind of feel it weird that is it the government is signaling to the world that we are on one hand freeing women's right to the access to this technology while causing some problems on restriction on women's body or use of women's body.
And how are Taiwanese NGOs reacting to this bill? What have you noticed in the community?
Okay, I cannot speak for all the NGOs, but from as far as I know, the Women Awakening Foundation, we have aligned together with 26 other NGOs. We are taking this approach to separate the surrogacy from the already existed assisted reproduction law. The reason for that is we find it, even though from the medical perspective, they find them are the similar thing, but for us, it is very different approach because after all, when we use surrogacy, it means some people can borrow from another woman of their womb. And then this country is legalizing and granting such a right to certain people to use of others' body. We want to be more responsible. We want to take a prudent approach to separate the surrogacy part and then to broaden the scope of access to those, for example, IVF or egg freezing technology to more women.
You mentioned your organization, Awakening Foundation, and 26 other NGOs. They advocate for the separation of the surrogacy and then other assisted reproductive procedures within this bill.
Right.
Can we go a bit more into why that is?
Most of these kind of rules that link to women's body could be categorized as medical aspect or from the ethical perspective or from the legal or human rights perspective. But unfortunately, it is always the case that the law is driven by a lot of medical experts. And we worry that if without sufficient discussion and taking into account multiple expertise aspects, we could be not sufficiently providing a better mechanism to all those expected parents as well as the surrogated mother. And not to mention that because when it comes with the surrogated mother, now we have the expected parents' right to cover, we have the surrogated mother's right to cover, and not to mention the child to be born. And then we also want to include their consideration, and for example, will there be the mechanism providing them to have access to the surrogated mother? And would they have the information from whom she or he was born? And has the court be ready to giving a ruling to who is the mom, who is not? That is a totally changing to the legal system. So really, we want to take all these aspects into account and instead of just rushing in.
Absolutely. Well, now I think that's a great point for us to zoom out and look at this as a global issue. So looking around the world, there seems to be a really wide range between countries of what they consider legal, what becomes altruistic surrogacy, what becomes commercial surrogacy. So which countries have legalized this and what have the long-term effects?
Well, we are still doing our research. As far as I know that a lot of European countries such as Britain, such as Ukraine.
A lot of people from Taiwan go to Ukraine.
Yeah. And then a lot of countries such as Germany and as well as in the North America, for example, Canada and US. But there is no such a federal law there, it's just state law. And we see this trend that a lot of states are legalizing the surrogacy. But I just want to emphasize that because in the US approach that you can see, we can just put it as like 50 countries in the same land. So it is about, the market competitiveness. But when you mention non-commercial surrogacy, there are different mechanisms. For example, California, everybody knows that it has the most market-driven surrogacy law. And the latest version, the latest one, who legalized surrogacy is the New York State. And then New York State is more or less like maintaining the both track of it. But we don't have sufficient information on what's the consequence of such a move. So really it is a unexplored aspect for us to continue work on.
Mm-hmm. Earlier in the clip we played, we saw that there are many sides to the surrogacy debate. One is that this would be beneficial for LGBTQ plus couples who want to start their family. And then the other was from a women's organization who said, yes, that may be great, but also this could economically exploit women. How would that work if women are volunteering to do this?
Well, the thing is, we doubt if they are the true volunteer because the voluntary requires the total understanding of the all consequence, all the rights or their legal position, what would be the risk of it. Just as we can learn from those cases, the termination of pregnancy, that kind of thing, material information and true consent really matters. And of course, as we mentioned, that the law now requires only the experienced mother to become the surrogated mother. But still that if you can listen to women's story, that the risk could still arouse and it could be very individual. And not only the health risk, but also, the mental issues as well as, the process. Now we are relying on the doctor's prescription and relying on doctor's assessment on who can become the expected parents And then a lot of time, we do know that this is, human-driven kind of decision. Our doctors would always follow the code of conduct. But I'm saying this market drive is too strong. So we really want to have a more neutral mechanism to prevent from any bad things happening.
And I know part of it was the economic compensation, as they called it, but it was an allowance. Yes. And it was for anything involving the pregnancy. But how would they deem what is considered an allowance, what's considered a luxury, what is considered compensation versus just taking care of someone who's carrying your child?
We don't know. The fact is, you do know that the bill is just a language. So when we name it as altruist kind of surrogacy, and I think I understand their pain. They don't want to label it as commercialized, but really it is always about borrowing or lending, leasing somebody's body. And how do we calculate such a compensation? A huge amount of money can be said as truly just allowances. But on the other hand, we worry that turn out these young women could only get very limited compensation throughout the labor.
Fertility rates are low in Taiwan, but is that a viable option to address this, or are there other things that Taiwan
Of course, if you ask me, I would say no. I think interesting enough is you have to take into the core issue that the core reason is why do not women in Taiwan willing to be a mother? And then if you ask, there are multiple reasons, multiple contexts. For example, the traditional culture, the masculine culture, and then the not so well balanced workplace and personal life. And then of course, economic concern. A lot of people, they're trying to pursue their career, and you do know that the time is tick-tick. And then most importantly, it's not only about being a mom. Being a mom is a very important burden or responsibility, sweet responsibility, but it requires a lot of support. Support, when I say support, I don't mean purely, the government granting the money. I mean that do we have sufficient quality public kindergarten? Do we have good daycare center? Do we have, this mechanism allowing mothers to be herself at the same time as well as taking care of their child? I think overall, these are the reason behind, and that would be, from my perspective, the only solution to solve this risk. And if I may say even more, our research, if you look at all those countries with better facilitation to motherhood and better work-life balance, such as North European country like Norway or Finland, they actually have higher educated women giving birth to a lot of kids and with a high fertility in their country. And on the other hand, we see in East Asia countries, Taiwan, Japan, Korean, women are not willing to give birth to a kid. I still believe being a mom is a beautiful thing and it should be a right, but when the total facilitation and the whole society doesn't create such a good surroundings for women free to decide be a mom or not to be a mom, that could be one issue.
Well, Christina, thank you so much for joining us today. We've really learned a lot.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more stories from TaiwanPlus News, please follow us on social media. We'll see you next time.